Welcome to 2025, ladies and gentlemen. We are.
Hi everyone, welcome back to
Oh
the Not That
man.
Bad podcast where we talk about movies and other shit that doesn't matter. I'm one of your co-hosts, Gabe.
I'm your other co-host, Connor, and we thought, what better way to ring in the new year other than in not that bad fashion, which is late and harkening back to our early days. Not doing anything new, but having a fun discussion
Yeah.
nonetheless. We are going to be revisiting an old one today, but first. Just recently, at the time of recording, we lost a bit of a titan in the film industry, at least to many film students and people who want to do this for a living.
Me,
You want to
I'm the
talk a
film
little bit about
student.
it? Yeah, no, you want to talk a little bit about it for us?
Right before we started recording, David Lynch, the director of such classics as Eraserhead, The Elephant Man, Blue Velvet, Mulholland Drive, and the co-creator of Twin Peaks, passed away just before his 79th birthday. What would have been his 79th birthday? We have talked about David Lynch before on this channel. We talked
We
about
have.
his ill-fated Dune adaptation. So if you want to hear us go more in depth on our thoughts about the man, you can check out that episode, even though that is not the best way to commemorate the
No.
memory of David Lynch. We were talking about probably his the film in his body of work that he regretted making the most. But you can hear our discussion about the rest of his work and why he was such an important filmmaker to me and so many other snobs and film bros out there. And I did write a tribute to him on my Substack that I'll link below. But yeah, I've been mourning that man's loss ever since it happened. It was a really surreal thing. Um, Even though we knew that he had health problems, and of course he was 78, almost 79. He was just such a larger than life personality, such a unique figure that it was just hard to believe that he really passed away and he's no longer with us. So I had to address that. That is the most recent film news uh, as of our time of recording this. And I wanted to do a real discussion about David Lynch for this episode, and my co-host said that he's not very complimentary on Mr. Lynch, so that was probably not, again, the best way to
Yeah.
commemorate the man's passing. But I will definitely nominate um, another one of his films for a future discussion. Um, for Lynch fans, you probably can guess what I'm thinking of because it's his other big, movie that infamously bombed with critics and audiences upon its first release, and now it's something of a cult classic. Anyways, we are not here technically to talk about David Lynch.
Yeah.
We are doing another revisited episode. I believe this is the second time we're
Yeah.
revisiting an old episode, right? The first time was The Phantom Menace.
Hmm.
And now we're revisiting one of the first films we ever talked about. In fact, Connor noted to me that it was the fourth episode we ever did.
Episode 4 of Not That Bad, July of 2022. We covered The Wolfman from 2010. This was an early episode for us. I always I always fight this urge to be like, hey, go back and watch this original episode if you want to see all our thoughts. Because I think it's, we definitely went more in depth than we're going to be going in this episode. We'll be the first to tell you, we were very early on at this point. So it's not necessarily our finest work. But if you would like to go give us a view there, it would be great. It was really our first video to do very well on YouTube. We were doing pretty well on the Spotify platform at that time, but it was kind of the first one to pop off on YouTube for us. So it's got a special place in our heart. Back then, however, we did have a discussion about the film in which Gabe gave the film a not that bad rating, and I, for the first time ever on the show at that point, gave a film a that bad rating. I'm interested to see if those hold up for both of us throughout the course of this episode, but the film itself stacking up pretty interestingly, and I think this is a good way to segue to basically the reason that we're going back and visiting this film today. This film has a 2.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd as of the time of this recording, but it is not the only, or let's say this, it's not the most recent take on the Wolfman just this year. Director and writer and actor, pretty talented guy, Leigh Whannell, has unleashed his version of the Wolfman after directing a very successful, I'd say both critically and commercially, The Invisible Man a couple of years ago. Now, I have not seen this film. I certainly have my thoughts on the trailer, but Gabe here has seen the new Wolfman film. And before I get into your thoughts, before I kind of throw it to you here, I do want to say this film that we're covering today, 2.7 out of 5 on Letterboxd. Care to guess where Leigh Whannell's is at this present time?
2.5.
Oh, 2.6. You were so close. That's
Wow.
kind of impressive, though. Yeah, 2.6. This is actually currently less favored over the 2010 version. What are your thoughts
Well,
coming out of your viewing of Wolfman?
well, first off, it had a really disappointing opening weekend at the box
Yes.
office. And its mid-January release was pretty ominous for people who were
Yeah.
excited about it, like I was. Let me rehash something that I talked ad nauseum about in our first Wolfman discussion. The original The Wolfman, and especially Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, huge formative movie that got me into movies, that gave me the identity of being a movie freak, and especially a monster movie hound. I
Yeah.
was obsessed with the Universal monster movies from that point on. So it's a special film to me. And I think it holds up in a lot of ways, that 1941 The Wolfman. It's pretty slow and surprisingly lacks action for,
Hmm.
given that it's a monster movie.
Yep.
But it has one of the great performances in the history of horror cinema, Lon Chaney Jr. as Lawrence Talbot, uh, of which he would reprise that role many times. It was the most famous role that he really owned. No other actor before Benicio del Toro ever played Lawrence Talbot, which was pretty rare back then. So we get the 2010 version. It comes out when I'm 12, and I go gaga for it,
Hmm.
because I had not developed critical thinking skills yet. So I just I wholly embraced it. I accepted it. Just any movie that could remind me of the experience of watching the original The Wolfman was something I was just going to instantly love.
Absolutely.
And go back and listen to the original episode we did to hear a more thorough breakdown on this. But as I've gotten older and as I've watched that film more times, I see the flaws. It's not a perfect movie or a perfect remake by any means. And I defended it. I certainly liked it more than Connor, but
Yeah.
I was hoping that we could get a superior remake, or reimagining, or just a new movie with that character, Lawrence Talbot, the Wolfman, in the future. So imagine my delight when I hear that Leigh Whannell, one of my favorite working directors and
Oh
screenwriters,
yeah.
after after doing again a very successful adaptation of The Invisible Man.
And
Now
we can't
he's
forget his
going.
movie Upgrade. Upgrade was a huge surprise for me. And because he also directed
He directed that. It was not his
yeah,
debut. That was Insidious Chapter
Chapter 3.
3,
Which
which
we
I hear
have
is pretty
talked
good.
about. I talked about it with Mia from Halusa Arts on Instagram. Check that out if you want to hear our thoughts on that. But Leigh Whannell is a guy that I mean, we both have a lot of connections to. We love the Saw movies, Insidious, all that stuff.
Yeah, and we used to be friends on Twitter, me and
Yeah.
him, uh, until he, fled that platform like so many others. I'm still on Twitter, by the way, but I will not call it anything other than Twitter. So I guess that's my political compass test.
Yeah.
uh, I was obviously very excited. I guess I did have some kind of trepidation of, oh, are we just going to keep rehiring the same guy to readapt all of these old IPs, especially after the
Yeah.
Dark Universe? What I thought was going to happen is that all of these auteurs were going to get a chance to um, reinvent these classic properties, and we get very different visions. I didn't know if like there would be a new cinematic universe or if these would all be standalones. But when I heard that Leigh Whannell was doing the Wolfman, my one, uh, the asterisk on my excitement was part of me wanted to see somebody else get a chance to do this. But regardless, I'm still, especially when Ryan Gosling was announced as the Wolfman, like, oh my god, like they got an A-list movie star like Ryan Gosling. The script must be bonkers good. This is
Yeah.
going to be epic. This is, could be better than The Invisible Man. And then uh, I'm gonna label this the development drip process, where it's not development hell, where the project dies and never gets released, but clearly there's problems or you know um, difficulties, and things start to change. Drip, 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 and by the time it's out, it seems very different than the project we expected upon the announcement.
Right.
Mainly, right, Ryan Gosling drops out at some point. Can't remember exactly when that happened. Probably like 2021, 2022.
I'd say around
And
there.
yeah,
I don't remember hearing much about him afterwards. I actually had forgotten he was attached to it until I was doing research for this video. So
yeah, but I swear that happened. It is something that has faded from memory, but that did happen at some point.
it did. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure he was attached to the Leigh Whannell version. Um, but I digress. Now, the titular Wolfman is being played by another actor I love, I adore. I've been waiting for him to have a big, big breakthrough. Christopher Abbott. Um, if you have seen Girls, you know that he, like, no matter what role, what he does, he's a super naturally compelling actor. Always brings real weight to his roles, and as a true like an actor's actor, he does all these interesting projects and he takes these very challenging roles. I mean, he worked with Lena Dunham. I can't really imagine a more challenging prospect than that. But now he's the Wolfman, so I have a new reason to be. And I'm a fan of Girls. I'm a fan of Girls. I wear that
Oh,
on my sleeve. I actually really
oh
like
man.
Girls. But to me, I would love for him to be as famous as Adam Driver, the other breakout from Girls. I've been waiting for Christopher Abbott to have a moment there. So I'm still excited, right? And then I see the trailer. And I switch it over to you now, Connor, because it sounds like you might have had a similar response that I did, right? What was your
Yeah.
response upon seeing the Wolf, not the Wolfman,
Wolfman.
Wolfman,
Wolfman.
but you did see
Wolfman.
the Wolfman trailer. So the space Wolfman quotation marks trailer.
The Space Wolf slash Spaceman space trailer. Well, first I do want to say like I loved the idea of Leigh Whannell writing a majority of these movies. In my mind, what I thought would be cool is if you had sort of a uniform main writer, and then you had sort of a secondary writer come on to revise the script and direct the movie. I thought that would be cool. I think there's a lot of talented people out there that could get an opportunity to, what it does is it kind of sets up this precedent to do this sort of connected universe someday if you want to. I wouldn't be a huge fan of that, but if you want to do that, go ahead. It makes it more cohesive if you have sort of a base writer to do that around. I know with this new Wolfman movie, it was not Leigh Whannell who was the sole writer of the film.
No.
The secondary writer actually made her debut. She's an actress. This was her first major motion picture writing credit, which is cool. I think that's a really cool thing to do. But I was concerned when I saw that Leigh Whannell was directing it because even though I know he is a very capable director, there's just certain things that I think his style kind of feeds to. And the more horror elements, he's a very good jump scare director and he's a very good tension director, but I didn't know how that would translate to a story about a wolfman or a werewolf. This case, it seems to particularly be a wolf man. But I saw the trailer. I was really excited. I saw that it came out. People were talking about it. There was a lot of buzz about it. I didn't read anything. I was like, I just want to watch it on my own. And I mean, it just took every bit of wind out of my sails. I made it kind of clear that I feel a little disconnected from the movie world today. I don't have a ton of time to watch stuff. When I do watch stuff, it's usually older stuff to make me feel better about everything going on always. But I've seen the one exception to that has been Longlegs. When I saw that trailer, I thought it didn't give away as much. I thought it had a ton of intrigue around it, and it made me want to watch the movie more. And this trailer is the polar opposite. I've never recently I've seen a lot of trailers where I'm like, oh, that looks interesting, but I probably won't, get a chance to watch it, and that's fine. I don't really feel either way about it. This is a movie that I've for years now been excited to come out, and I saw the trailer and immediately went, I don't think I'm gonna watch this movie. I hated it. I didn't like the
Okay.
bits that we saw of this Wolfman creature, and I didn't like what it seemed like they were doing with the story.
You had a harsher reaction than me, but I was not excited by the trailer. And something I picked up on was that this was going to be a very small film. This is, having seen it, I can confirm that this is the only werewolf film I've seen that I could imagine being done as a stage play. You have really
Oh,
three characters uh, at a farm for 90% of the movie, and it is it has a real minimalist approach, which is what I'll say for now because I don't want to spoil it. I think people should go out and see it. I did end up liking the movie
oh,
more than I guess I thought I would based on the trailer, and definitely I liked it more than some other audiences and reviewers. I would give it higher than a 2.5 or
oh, you'd
2.6.
say it's not that bad. Oh.
I would. So, 10 years down the line, I can see us coming back and going back to the well. But and this is not a review of that movie, of course, but what I'm
Right.
going to do is use this as a real jumping off point and this frame of reference for our conversation about 2010's The Wolf Man, starring Benicio del Toro, Anthony Hopkins, Emily Blunt, because now we have uh, someone else take a stab at reimagining this character, this property. Although I should say, this is basically Wolfman in name only. The main character's name is not even Lawrence Talbot, which I don't understand why uh, remakes that uh, that are pitched obviously as remakes, designed to be remakes, marketed as remakes, and we can't share the name from that classic character. That's just very it was needless to me, and I would have accepted this as a movie on its own terms, but that's clearly not the intention of the people making the movie. This is a remake of The Wolfman from 1941. So yeah, I guess having seen the movie, I think the best place to segue is that we have two opposite ends of the spectrum here in approaching a remake, right? The 2010 version, as we noted before, was really trying to be a love letter to that whole era of the Universal monsters, just that era of genre storytelling. It was set in Victorian England, really
Yeah.
embraced a lot of the tropes that we kind of associate uh, with that era, like gypsies and you know mythic curses and all of that stuff. And it was trying to, more than reimagine the Wolfman, it was trying to take the tradition that the original represented and bring that to a modern audience without without really updating it. And to a lot of modern audience members, uh, it felt corny, it felt dated. It could have used uh, either a more modern take or some crucial updating to really translate what worked in 1941 for audiences in 2010. And Wolfman is a a reinvention that completely severs its relationship with what came before it. It is a uh, a werewolf film produced in 2025, and that shows in really every aspect: the writing, the characterization, the settings, the style. I mean, this is emblematic of kind of every trope that we would associate with where horror is at right now. It has streaks of elevated horror conceptions. It reminded me at various points of like A Quiet Place, which is not elevated horror, but uh, you know, a lot of that minimalism, a lot of that, I think, attempt to be more character driven. But yeah, Wolfman is trying to be of its moment, appeal almost strictly to the audience of the time, and has distanced itself, I would say, almost completely from the traditions of the Universal monster, uh, you know, universe. Given given the dichotomy I just laid out, um, does that inform how you look back on 2010's The Wolfman?
There has been a lot that went into this reviewing for me. First off, you know me, I don't really like to be negative about movies. When I come away from a movie not liking it, unless I absolutely hate it, I feel bad. Like I want to like every movie that I watch. I don't know why anybody would want to hate a movie. It's 2 hours of your life that you'll never get back. So I I've softened a lot since we did that episode. I think I was inclined to be much more negative when we first started than I am now. But also, having seen the trailer and the reactions, early reactions to the movie coming out, and to people's thoughts about the trailer, and then to people's thoughts about the movie, and I don't know. There was a lot that went into this recent viewing, and actually hearing you say that about what the new movie is, it is going to inform a couple of things that I'll say throughout this episode, kind of reevaluating this 2010 version once again. But for you, how was that for you? Did you rewatch this movie before or after you watched the new Wolfman?
Before.
Before. Okay. So it didn't necessarily affect you going into it, but now coming out of
But
Wolfman 2025.
I was thinking about uh, the 2010 Wolfman the whole time watching the
Okay.
original version. In fact, they steal a major plot element from
They
the
do.
2010 version. I was kind
Wow.
of shocked. No, I was more than a little shocked. I and I don't want to spoil the new Wolfman for anybody. If I mean, do you plan on seeing it?
Uh, I mean, probably not. I mean, if honestly, right now, you could tell me and just completely bleep it out of the recording, and nobody would know.
Maybe I'll tell you off. off camera. But what's important here is that we even have a side by side comparison of how these two, this beat, this story beat, is done in both versions. And the feeling I have about the 2000 film version now is that I'm almost shocked that it exists. I'm shocked that a major studio in the 21st century allowed filmmakers to remake this old ass movie with such a loyalty to not only the text of that movie, but the you know the the whole moment in time that it represented, right? Everything we were talking about, the setting, the very mythos of the werewolf in that film versus the new film. It's kind of shocking to me in retrospect, and I know that movie's failure, the 2010 movie's failure, is actually kind of what got us to this point in a way, because
Yeah.
you know uh, I don't know if it was seen as a risk at the time, but it definitely must have turned people away. It's so weird because in 1999 there was such a big hit with Sleepy Hollow, which does what I think the Wolfman was trying to do perfectly, and I know that because the screenwriter who who wrote Sleepy Hollow also wrote the Wolfman, the 2010 Wolfman.
Yeah.
Um, but I don't know if it's just that's how much the culture changed, or some of the blemishes of that movie were just too much for audiences to ignore, or maybe it made the whole thing feel really, again, corny and hokey, and not classic or literary. But I still look back and I'm grateful. I'm grateful that that 2010 remake was made when it was. But I guess I'm also mad at it because it kind of helped kill this whole, uh, old Victorian style gothic, monster movie genre. That was its own genre, and now it's been reinvented into something that I really don't recognize as a fan of that original movie. But I also have to say that werewolf movies are where I'm at my most traditional. Like, if you're a werewolf movie that doesn't have like the silver bullet, the full moon, if you're making a movie called The Wolfman and nobody says, even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolf bane blooms and the full moon is bright. If you're not saying that, then I don't really know what we're doing here. Um, and no shade to the great Leigh Whannell. I just think this was, as far as being a remake goes, I think it was just a misguided, uh, you know, casting of writer to the project. I can say some positive things about how the movie stands on its own, but even compared to the Invisible Man remake, which took plenty of liberties with the source material, at least they kept the name of the Invisible Man, right?
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna say something. I might regret saying this later, but it doesn't have to be this difficult. Like, it doesn't have to be this hard. I get so mad, especially when it's somebody as talented as Leigh Whannell, and I'm not gonna put the blame on him, right? There's a lot of factors that go into making a
I will
movie.
say the impression I had is that this was a a, a very small movie, probably smaller than the way it was originally intended. I have a
Yeah.
really hard time seeing Ryan Gosling getting attached to this script, to a project at this scale, unless they were prepared to just pay Ryan Gosling
Well,
95% of the budget, which maybe that could have happened. I don't know.
possible. It's possible. I just, I a little, people, if they've been watching us for a while, they know that we're both screenwriters to varying degrees. I say that because you are much more of a screenwriter than I am. But
Oh,
I
Connor.
I do my writing, and I've been for the last several years, I've had scripts I've put together scripts for, a werewolf character or a Dracula character and things of that nature. And every time I write it, or work on it, and go back to it, I just think like, why does it have to be so hard for people in Hollywood to get? I mean, there are certain components that you got to include. There's certain things you have to have, and but like they either throw too much money at it or they don't throw enough. They either make it this big grand CGI fest craziness that everybody's gonna feel certain ways about, or they don't use enough, or they don't pay enough for these things, and why does it have to be this difficult? That said, though, watching this back this time, and this time I actually had the luxury of watching both versions of the film. I watched the original cut and the director's cut,
You
which I
really
had
did your
not done
homework.
the original time. Um, there is this appreciation that I have of the method of going all out on it. There's interferences, right? There's things that the studio did that made the movie turn out a little different than probably the director envisioned, definitely the crew. I mean, learning that Benicio del Toro was not only a fan, but also like a collector of Wolfman memorabilia before taking this role on. I believe I was much more harsh on him the first time that I covered this.
I
I do
remember one
think
of
he
our big
was
disagreements was I thought he was quite good in the role, and I think you thought he was quite bad.
I believe if that's how I remember it as well, and if that's the case, I've done almost a complete 180 on that. My thoughts on him are this: I think if you're gonna do a remake of that story, he's like almost perfect. He's almost perfect for it, as an actor. But I don't think he was given enough development in the story for it to catch with me. And I think that's what I caught last
Hmm.
time. It made me unfair to him. But I do believe I was unfair to him before because watching it, like especially what got me was I was looking at stills for the for making the thumbnail for this episode. And I was like, man, he just like fits that look. If you were to ask me like who would you cast as this character in this time period? I can't think of anybody more perfect, look wise. And so rewatching, especially both cuts, there are important scenes that I think are missing in the final cut of this film, that help the story and the character a little more, just a bit. But I will hold that his development is not quite there. But I do think like as far as casting goes, I was definitely more harsh the first time that I watched this movie, and I want to make sure that I praise Benicio del Toro here.
I think I might have commented back then in that discussion that what I liked about his performance, I think, took a little more time to appreciate. I don't think I fully appreciated his performance. You know, the first couple times I watched it, I think it
Mhm.
had to sit with me for some time. But what I appreciate about that performance he gives is just how moody it is. I think he's probably too downbeat for a lot of people. I think that's probably what what you were disconnected from at the time. It almost feels like he's phoning it in. Uh,
I think that's my big problem is like I don't I think one thing that makes him sort of perfect is the very few times that they make like one of the things that makes Lon Chaney Jr.'s performance so good in the original is that like you can see how this is wearing on him as a character. His the bags under the eyes, I know it's in black and white, but you can almost see like his color draining and you can see him he's just a wreck as this is happening and as he's trying to fight between both sides of him. And one thing that I think kind of stuck out when watching the original film again, which I revisited last year, was that there was such a heavy emphasis on the villain of the film being the fact that he's a werewolf. Not he's not a villain per se, but this other side of him is kind of the villain, or I guess the curse of the
yes,
werewolf is kind
yes,
of the villain, and
absolutely.
that's not what this movie does. So you don't get as many moments of that, but that's what I think Benicio del Toro shines in this movie is those scenes where he is heavily affected by what's happening to him. He shines. I mean, he
Yep.
completely shines.
And this is the big criticism um, from fans of the original towards this version. Um, I know why modern audiences don't like it because it's this stuffy um, movie set in
Dreary.
like the 1800s and
Yeah.
has, in 2 hours maybe has like 30 minutes of werewolves on screen.
It's a little slow.
Yeah, but for purists like myself, the big problem upon seeing it was that they gave Lawrence a villain, which really undermines his internal struggle. It really undermines the duality of the beast, which is really at the heart of the tragedy that is the original The Wolfman. It's a tragedy. It's really one of the most. I mean, Lawrence Talbot is one of the most tragic heroes that cinema's ever produced. I would dare to say, uh, and of the of the screen monsters who are not who are like who look human and aren't created to be monsters like the Frankenstein monster. He is the most compelling to me for that reason. And what I said back then is what I'll say this time. What I have decided to interpret this movie as is not the story of a man who's conflicted with his own, personal demons, but a case study of two men who both are plagued with personal demons. One who is trying to fight those demons, and the other who has decided to embrace them. Right. And it's really interesting to me when you think of this perhaps as an allegory for, a hereditary kind of mental illness or other affliction. So when I recontextualized the 2010 version that way, something really clicked for me, and I actually really liked that decision. I don't love uh, everything about its execution, but in theory, and as that idea is brought to life by these two actors, Benicio del Toro and Anthony Hopkins, I think it really works. There is something about seeing the old man werewolf that kind of takes you out. It was a really effective idea, but there's something really silly about watching these, father and son wolf fight on screen,
Yeah. Yeah.
which I'm sure is something we agreed on at the
Would you
time.
think like a werewolf fight? Are you kidding me? Like I think I believe I was mad about this before, but I was actually more angry watching it now. It's like, how do you fuck up a fight between two werewolves? Like this should
Because
have been the
that's,
most epic thing ever.
I don't know. I don't think it is, because that's not the point of the wolf man,
Well, no,
as a
but I'm saying
character.
like if you're going to introduce that, that better be the best part of your movie. I mean, if you're gonna have two wolves fighting it, but I especially this time around, like the best parts were those sort of subtle parts of him fighting off. I mean, effectively in this movie, what he's trying to do is he's trying to save Emily Blunt's character, and
Yeah.
he's trying to make sure that he doesn't hurt her and that he
And
doesn't
he's
hurt anyone
trying to
else.
break
And
the chain. I think
yeah,
that's another big thing. Hurt people, people with werewolf fathers become werewolves.
yeah,
And,
man, that pesky
there's,
story.
there's this curse to the bloodline that is causing these, the men of this family to be monsters, to act like monsters. And I think Lawrence here is trying to break the chain more than anything, which of course means in part saving Emily Blunt, who, this is the first time I saw her, and man, did I have a big crush on her walking out of the theater.
Hmm.
Even though
She's
in retrospect, she doesn't have that much to do in the movie.
it's upsetting because like I think what they did in the end of the movie with her character and making her sort of have to be the one, to put an end to everything is like such a good way to do it, but it means little to nothing because she's just been nothing for most of the movie. She's been
I know, I know.
it again, it's sort of like what you just said a moment ago with the execution of the whole father-son angle. It's a cool little twist to throw in there, right? That like, especially since there's the involvement of the brother character, and it's like, oh, well, it was the father who killed the brother and the mother. Like, okay, like that's okay, that's an interesting way to take it. But then it's like, okay, what you'd think they'd do is that there's more of like a devil on the shoulder aspect, right? Where it's like you need to embrace it the way I have and you need to do this. And then it's like, well, no, you killed mom and you killed, my brother and you did all these things and it's wrong. And then you have him sort of fighting it to the point where he's almost kind of embraced it in the fact that he's not evil like his father, and he's been able to find a balance as the wolf and break through his humanity or whatever, but they don't do that. They don't do that at all. And it's the same thing with Emily Blunt's character,
Mm.
and it's like if she's supposed to be this character that we're supposed to truly like empathize with and feel the gravity of this huge moment that they write in the end of the movie, then give us stuff to build to it that makes us feel for this character or relate to or anything other than just, oh, cool, Emily Blunt's in this.
I don't think there's nothing. I don't think there's a total absence of development there. I think it's kind of crowded out, because this is a surprisingly busy movie. I really don't think
Yeah.
Hugo Weaving needs to be in this movie at all.
No, or at least I think that character should have been hugely diminished if you're gonna introduce all the rest of this stuff.
But talk about somebody who really has no role in the movie. I mean, I guess I like the idea that the Wolfman, he becomes a fugitive, um, and maybe you need some central character, um, from the police. But this is not the movie The Fugitive. This is
Well,
not
they also try to
about.
make it a mystery. Like it's like these characters are trying to solve the answers to questions that we've answered in the story
Yeah,
already. Like the audience is well aware of everything that's going on, and the way that mysteries are executed most effectively is when the audience is learning this information with the characters. Even if it's not a main character that we're learning it with, that's the most effective way to do it. And when you're watching this movie, Hugo Weaving's character is trying to figure this all out while we know it already. It's just a waste of time. I mean,
I
he
couldn't
could have
tell
been
if
in
the
half of
movie.
the scenes he's in.
I couldn't tell what the movie wanted us to think about his character.
Ah,
Um, and sometimes he seems incompetent because, we know things that he doesn't, and he's scrambling to find
yeah.
out. And other times it seems like, we should be threatened by him, that Lawrence Talbot should be threatened by him, even though he really doesn't do anything of consequence. But can we segue to the thing that is far and away, the best thing about this movie, and far and away the thing it has over the newest version? Can you
I'd
guess?
be curious to hear. Would it involve the visual aspect?
Would it involve the visual aspect? I don't know. Do you count the entire look and design of the titular werewolf part of the
Oh,
visual
okay. Yeah,
aspect?
the wolf. See, I don't the trailers for the new film don't show enough that I can actually draw real criticism, but
Yeah,
I can say that if it's anything like what I've heard, I'm not a fan, probably. I
I
like a
am.
more like wolfy werewolf. Like American Werewolf in London is like most of the direction that I would take if I was making a werewolf character.
This 2010 remake of The Wolfman has my favorite, on-screen werewolf to date. This
Really?
is
Okay.
my werewolf. This is everything I want out of a werewolf.
So you kind of
Uh,
prefer the wolf man aspect with the two leg with
I
mostly walking on two legs and such?
I prefer a wolf man to have equal emphasis on wolf and
Wolf
man.
and
You
man.
know what I mean? Like a
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
true
I see what you mean.
hybrid. And I think I've brought this up, but I don't love the American Werewolf version, which is ironic because I still think that's the best werewolf movie, but I don't love It's Werewolf because it just looks like a big dog.
I wish there were more human aspects with it. I like the menace of it. It's very when I think of like a horror version of a werewolf, that's what I think of. And when I think of like a more um uh dramatic version of the character. I kind of think of this, but I have softened on. I didn't like the design first time I watched it. I have a more of appreciation for it because it was really kind of expertly crafted. I think there's some scenes where it looks silly though. I think we both kind of can acknowledge that, especially with Anthony Hopkins.
This, oh yeah, this version.
Yeah.
I well, seeing Anthony Hopkins, who was, I'm sure, in his 70s when he did this film,
Yeah.
watching him turn into a werewolf before our very eyes, that's the moment where the suspension of disbelief really collapses, and
I
it
just hate how
becomes.
much of his face you get. Like, I love him in so much of the movie, but it's just like, especially his eyes, they just don't work as a werewolf, man. It's just it's weird looking. I thought it looked kind of silly, but I did warm up to Benicio's look a little, especially a little bit more.
I really don't see what what issue that somebody could have with this design. I think people just don't like this movie, and I'm not saying this is your perception, but
Right.
when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
hear people broadly make fun of this werewolf, I can only surmise that they don't like the movie and they aren't going to pay a lick of respect to it, even though this is Rick Baker's work. I mean,
Oh
it
yeah.
won an Oscar, which some people find
Damn right it
laughable, but
did.
you know, that's a better win than Suicide Squad, right?
I'm no, and I'm a big Rick Baker fan. He's done the makeup effects for, I mean, movies that I love. I mean, absolutely love. I think he is an incredible artist. I think if I'm being truthful, I don't think I fully appreciated it enough last time that I watched this because of my I made it known last time that I did not have a good time watching the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I
And the
felt it was
werewolf doesn't show up
long.
for like 45 minutes.
No, and I felt it. I felt it was long. I felt it was paced weird. I felt it was edited weird, and I still feel some of those things
Mm-hmm.
watching the movie now. But it's almost like I've been able to adjust to some of those things, and in doing so, I mean, being able to appreciate Rick Baker's work more is something that I always try to do,
And this
no
has
matter
one
what
of
it
my
is.
this has one of my favorite set pieces in all of werewolf cinema. It's one of my favorite werewolf transformations, not because of the sheer awesomeness of the effects. It's not like an American Werewolf situation, but the actual
Yeah.
setup of the scene, uh, and how it's paced, how it's shot, everything is so perfect to me. Where he transforms in front of all those snooty English doctors who are going to examine him um, on the night of the full moon, especially whoever's playing that lead doctor who's being such a dick the whole time,
Yeah, right.
and he just refuses to turn around. He, like, even though everybody is starting to like, doctor,
Shove, what the fuck is that? Oh man.
blimey,
Before we move on from Rick Baker, I am just curious. What do you think is his finest work?
I mean, that's a big question, and he was a
It's
pretty
hard.
prolific man, and I
I'll
can't
just let me rail
think
off
off
a
the top of my head.
couple. Let me rail off a couple of his huge works that people would know him from in case somebody
Mm-hmm.
doesn't know Rick Baker. We've covered a few of his films on this channel, including Batman Forever, this movie, The Wolfman. He did King Kong that we covered on this
Yes, the
channel.
1976 King Kong.
He's also, oh, go ahead.
I was very generous with my praise
You were.
of his work in
I
that
think
film.
you
I
were.
don't think you were as generous as I
No,
was.
I was not. But he also did the original Star Wars. He did The Empire Strikes Back, one of my favorite Christmas movie, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. He was involved in American Werewolf in London as well. The Men in Black movies, Coming to America, Ed Wood, Planet of the Apes, The Fun House, which we've talked about as well. I
Yeah.
actually didn't know he did The Fun House until right now.
We,
Um,
the sad truth is that probably his finest work, not the best movie he worked on, but his finest work is probably Planet of the Apes, right?
I would honestly say How the Grinch Stole Christmas, probably. I mean, he had to, like, we're talking hundreds at times of extras, all in perfect Who makeup. I mean, you could say Planet of the Apes is definitely up there because of the sheer scale of the makeup effects. But didn't he? Okay, so he also did Thriller, and Thriller
Yeah.
is, I mean, it's
Michael Jackson
groundbreaking in
hired
itself.
yeah, Michael Jackson hired everybody who worked on an American Werewolf in London to make
which
that music
is
video.
very, very smart. He's done a lot of wolf projects I'm seeing in his career, but he's I mean, look,
Well, he
he
is
has said that he was a huge Wolfman fan. He was
yeah,
inspired by the original film, and he not only wanted to do this movie, but like jumped at the opportunity to do this. When he heard it was happening, he was like, "Can I please do this?" And they were like,
right.
"Yes."
And that's one of those other things. Like in some ways, this looked like a dream project. Like Benicio del Toro, Academy Award winner Benicio del Toro is starring as Lord Salden. Rick
Yep.
Baker is doing the makeup. Like holy shit.
And I mean,
Um,
Anthony Hopkins being like this dramatic, dark character in your werewolf movie, like
yeah.
on the surface, why wouldn't you want that ever?
I'm
Like,
embarrassed that I did not call the twist of him being the villain. I don't know why. I just
yeah, I know, but like uh, I
I
get
was a
it.
kid, to be fair.
Yeah,
To be
I
fair.
you know, but I wanna ask you about a certain aspect of this movie, which is the actual how the scenery plays on camera. You know, how they put everything together, the lighting, the cinematography choices, the fog, the gloom.
I
I
think this is
hate
a very visually appealing movie. I just have to say that right off the bat. I mean, uh, we can nitpick some things. I think I like the idea that this werewolf runs on all fours, but something
yeah.
about seeing seeing him run through gloomy Victorian England, like I just imagine like him like um meeting Heathcliff, or encountering somebody from like a Jane Eyre novel. Uh, this Wolfman on all fours. So yeah, you can nitpick some things, and what I think some snobs would say is that this movie might want to look atmospheric, but it's clearly too much of a studio product. When you put this against a Robert Eggers movie, those movies are deliciously atmospheric. But but hey, man, I
Oh
manage
man.
expectations. This is a studio film. This is a
Yeah.
Universal Studios film, and they staked a lot in this project. Um, but at the same time, I think it stays true to like, Hammer, Roger Corman. It's not as much of a work of art as like Sleepy Hollow. In many ways, this is like the B movie Sleepy Hollow. But you could do worse. You could do much worse. And let me tell you, man, after a 2-hour movie that's set at a farmhouse, my eyes are very pleased with this film, even though that's a well shot movie. The Leigh Whannell Wolfman. They shot it in rural Oregon, which is one of the most beautiful geographical spots in the continental United States. Although they really only reserved the most scenic parts of Oregon for the last 5 minutes. I don't know why they did
Hmm.
that, but yeah, no, this movie, um, it's professional, right? Joe Johnston is a very professional director, although I understand he had his hands tied on some
Yeah.
things.
Speaking of, I think that's a really good time to discuss the CG.
Okay.
I think we have to revisit that part because that's something that in the first time we talked about this, we had our ups and downs with, and every time anybody talks about this movie, it is a central focus of their discussion. So this most recent time, and especially comparing and contrasting with the new film that you've seen, I sort of want to get your perspective on it first for that reason. Where do you kind of stand this time around? Are there things you softened on? Maybe you've hardened against some
Mm.
of it. Where are you at now?
I mean, I lament how much CG was used in a movie that is trying to recreate the magic of, you know, the 1930s and 40s. Um, but when you read about the production troubles, it doesn't know, it almost doesn't feel fair to criticize it. You can say that it hurts your viewing experience. But for me, I am somebody who does allow context to shape how I watch a movie, and that can make
Absolutely.
me generous. And it can also make me harsher. When you hear how lazy some productions are with their use of CGI, they don't consider anything else. And today, when a supposedly prestigious movie that's a contender for Best Picture used AI to not only create computer generated effects of background elements, but they also used AI to correct the accents of its cast, right?
Mhm.
um if you know what I'm talking about. um so yeah, in that case, I'm like, really, really, that harshes me, hardens me against the movie. And when I hear about a movie having production woes and problems, I'm grateful that they brought on Rick Baker. They let him do his thing. He's not totally happy with the finished result, but I think he is proud of ultimately of what he created, and the movie is still a showcase for that. Um, there's interference, and there's some janky shots, and in 2025, not everything holds up, but I don't know. I don't feel mad about it.
I'll say this, especially this viewing, the night setting does help a lot with some of these sequences. Honestly, at this point, the only thing that I believe is unforgivable, and I'm going to hold it against the movie a little bit because of things that Joe Johnston said during production. And that is the fact that Rick Baker was ready and willing and able and practically begged to do to be able to do a transformation sequence. And look, I know he's got that chance before. I get it, but there is this sort of disconnection that I feel when it's not done practically. Like
Mm.
I feel the pain more of this transformation when you can physically see it happening, as opposed to it. I sort of compare this transformation, and I say this unfairly, but if you look at some of the shots, you'll kind of understand what I'm saying. In Space Jam, when the little aliens steal the powers and they get real big and their spine starts popping out and their muscles start getting big and they start growing. It's kind of what I feel like watching a CG werewolf transformation when compared to how well it does for me personally as a physical, a real, practical transformation would do. Um, but like I was pretty harsh on the CG before, and I
Mhm.
do think there are sequences that genuinely it enhances. Like werewolves jumping through the air is something that I think is like, jump covering great distances and lunging at things, and like that is a very animalistic thing to do if
Yeah,
you're trying to get across. It works well in this.
this is a more supernatural werewolf than
Yes.
Lon Chaney Jr. with his I believe it was Jack Pierce who did his makeup,
Mhm.
groundbreaking at the time, but you're not going to see that werewolf you know leap those buildings,
No.
or uh, throw people out from windows and they fall onto these
Huh.
spikes and their spine gets ripped out.
Yeah.
It's yeah, they used modern technology to realize some things that would have been almost impossible when the original was produced. And that, to me, is how you shouldn't ignore this new technology. You should just use it to execute ideas that would have been, you know, that you can only use with that technology, not to make it a substitute for things that are really integral to the texture of a film. The actual physical texture of looking at a a finished film, whether that be the production design, whether that be the lighting, all of those things that add up to create the actual uh, visual presentation of a movie.
You listening,
So yeah,
George?
what, George
Anyways,
Lucas? Wow, is it
I
2005 up in here?
uh, but no, I want to say like I absolutely feel that way this time. Watching the movie, I don't believe every single time that the CGI was used, it enhanced the experience. But it's going to come down to something that I'm going to say in my final verdict, with watching this movie again, about having fair expectations, especially after having seen it before. Um, you know, I think we can all be a little kinder to many of the CG sequences. The only one that I really have a hard time warming up to is the transformation sequence. I just don't think it is enhanced with CGI. I think there is a really, and even as recent as the movie Trick or Treat. They did a very different version of a werewolf transformation, but it still felt very real. It felt tangible. It felt like something that you were actually watching. I don't.
I think
Maybe that's unfair of me, but that's the only sequence that I can really say I would rather have the movie without it, despite what everything else it is. There's some things that I want to say, but I think transitioning that into a final verdict would probably be easier. So I think that's what we should do. As to remind everybody, this was again a revisited episode of the fourth ever Not That Bad episode, covering the Wolfman from 2010. For the first time ever on our show, I gave the film a that bad rating, and our friend Gabe here gave the film not that bad. It'll be interesting to see if those hold up following our discussion, following our revisit to this film. I want to start with you since you do have directly, not only did you give this film a more positive rating last time, but you also have a longer history with the Wolfman character and have seen now more properties than I have.
I've seen
uh,
every
yeah.
version of the Wolfman, I
So
guess.
I think you're the most qualified to deliver or to redeliver a final verdict, and let's see where you stand.
Well, now that you've laid out my credentials, I'm happy to lend my expertise. Right. So. Um, I'm trying to not be uh silly about this. I'm trying to be like critical or objective or whatever. But the truth is, I miss I miss the time that this represents. I miss a time when this movie could be considered a disappointment. Um, and this is a robust, well-fed movie. Okay, and we are starving in America for werewolf movies like this. It is not embarrassed at all to be a werewolf movie or to be a remake of, uh, you know, an old movie that most people haven't seen in a very, very long time, if they ever cared about it. Um, it weathered so many production woes. By the time it got out to theaters, it was basically a beaten dog and an embarrassment that everybody wanted to just write off, right? But man, I just wish we could go back to this, to whatever this was. Um, and I guess I should be more mad at this movie for kind of killing uh, everything I'm talking about, right? But it was the last gasp of that classic, adoration of gothic horror, of movies that had the old black and white Universal logo, instead of
Yeah.
the modern one. Gosh, I don't even know what to call this whole network of films I'm trying, because in my head this is also like Darkman. This is like what Darkman represents to me. But uh, I can only say that the critic in me still has problems with this movie, but the the traumatized monster movie fan in me, the traumatized werewolf fan in me, says this is an actually good, if ever I've seen one. Okay, still not actually great, but I kind of cherish this movie now. I want to hold it close to my chest and say, "Don't take it away from me," because we did not know how bad things were gonna get after this movie came out. We just didn't know yet.
Frankly, I'm glad to hear it. It's really cool to hear that position change. I guess we'll see if I land there. I don't look. We've been pretty positive, I think, overwhelmingly in this episode compared to our last one. One of the things that you said before delivering your last final verdict was that you said more bad things about good things, and that the good things did have some, asterisks next to them, or they frequently kind of stepped on themselves. And that's something that I don't necessarily disagree with, but that this time when watching, I think I had a bit of a different experience. Because the first couple times that I watched this movie, I think I focused a little too heavily on what the film wasn't as opposed to what it was. I was upset that this film didn't have more horror elements and didn't have a play on the terror that I feel like a werewolf would have as a kid who was genuinely terrified of werewolves. I thought they were going to kill. I thought it was going to be a huge problem in my life as I got older. Obviously, that didn't pan out, but not yet. Still a chance. But obviously, I've talked about where I think CGI was necessary and where I think it wasn't. I've talked about issues that I have with the character development and the execution of story elements, and I do have those problems still. That's not something that's gone from this movie. But man, like there's just a charm that it had during this rewatch that just made me appreciate it so much more than I ever had before. I still can't stand by this and say that I recommend it to everybody because I don't think it is one of those movies that everybody will have fun with or enjoy or whatever. But definitively, last time I said I didn't have a good time watching it, I had a decent time. I think that this movie has some things going for it that honestly none of the other monster movie remakes have had going for it so far. I think it's far from the best iteration. I think honestly, to me, that belongs to Leigh Whannell's Invisible Man. I love that movie dearly. I think when you're remaking a classic Universal Monsters movie, if you're going to bring it to the modern age, it's a great way to do it. But for now, like I gave this movie a that bad last time, and it's not that bad. It's not that bad at all. I've softened greatly
I knew I
since
could get that out of
2022.
you. I
And
knew just with some
yeah,
time and with some other really mediocre monster movies in between those recordings, I knew I could get it out of you. Right.
I mean
That's an interesting.
it's hard to criticize this movie after American Werewolf in Paris. It's very difficult.
That's a great question. Like, where does this rank for me in that whole league of Universal Monster remakes? I think it ranks pretty highly. I think it does. I know it. I know I like it more than uh, uh, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. I like it more than Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is probably the most heretical thing I have to say. I do not dig that movie.
I
In
don't really love
fact,
it either.
uh, it it's very off putting to me. In none of the ways that I think were intended by Mr. Coppola. Um, I like it more than The Invisible Man. I guess I kind of tried to bury this, but I'm not a huge fan of that movie. I
Oh,
respect it
okay.
more than I like it, uh, but I don't think it's aged that well for me.
Oh,
And
interesting.
when I go through the rest of the list, I mean, if you count Hollow Man as an Invisible Man remake, I guess I like Hollow Man a little bit more, but not by much, right?
I
So
do love the first two Mummy movies. If you want to, I know that they're not very horror centric,
right,
but I do believe they
um,
are considered a remake of the original
they
Mummy.
are, but I'm going to be a little stricter here because I don't see the point in comparing the Wolfman to the
They're
Mummy
very
starring Brendan
different
Fraser,
styles of movies. Yeah.
right?
You could
Hey, I like
compare the 2017 Mummy.
yeah. So guess which one I like more?
What? I don't know. I don't know which one you could appreciate more there.
No,
What's
it's
the
weird.
better movie?
The weird thing is that these remakes of Universal monster movies, they always had huge talent. Like there was no reason
Yeah.
that they shouldn't have been able to be, uh, home runs. And I can't think of a home run. Uh, they're like with any of these titles you bring up, I can think of a major flaw that they have. Usually more. So
I personally would consider Invisible Man a home run. I love that movie. I did have some issues with it here and there, but overall I thought it was pretty well executed.
the Invisible Man was, to me, it was a double, not a single,
Okay.
not a triple, but a double. Which, hey, that's you're halfway there.
I thought it was a home run, but it was one of those that's just over the fence, like where it could have been caught, the fielder just didn't jump up high enough to get it. It just over the fence.
To me, and this is, I guess, the reason I have a big soft spot for the movie. This movie remembers that the best part of these movies is the titular monster. Um, and
Yeah.
that's something that a lot of these other adaptations, especially the modern ones, really drop the ball on. I mean, the Invisible Man, I just can't love that movie because I find the actual Invisible Man to be such a non-entity in that movie. And I just don't accept the idea that now we're past the point where, like, these are characters, these monsters are characters, and instead are these, metaphors or allegories. I mean, they already were. The Wolfman is a perfect allegory. It was the original. The Wolfman was written by a German screenwriter who fled Nazi Germany and made the Wolfman an allegory for Nazism.
Well, I'll say this. I think if any character works in that way, that's what I did. I actually enjoyed that about The Invisible Man because it did sort of play on this like I think I don't feel the tragedy as much in an Invisible Man as I would a Wolfman. I think making him the villain and putting the focus on another character makes sense for that character. But that said, if they were to do that with a Wolfman movie, I would not be a big fan of that. Nor would I be a fan if they did that with like a Dracula or anything like that. Not that they can't make Dracula this mysterious kind of jump scary figure, but there has to be more to the character than that. Than what they did with the Invisible Man. I think it only works with that particular character.
I guess to me, the only reason in the world, other than money, to remake these movies and bring back these characters is because they are great characters. And that's what I want to see. I want to see them
It's
treated
fair.
as great characters. That doesn't mean you can't reinvent them for the modern age. I mean, I welcome that in
Yeah.
large part, but right. I mean, that's just how much of a little freak I was for those movies and how much they mattered to me. I mean, it's like, don't remake Hamlet and make him an extra so we can focus on whoever. I mean, I guess that's something they do for these kind of these like Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, those type of interesting
Right.
projects,
Yeah.
but don't call it Hamlet, right?
Right.
Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is not called Hamlet, all right? Because we know if we market this as Hamlet, this perfectly fun movie is going to be ruined for a lot of people.
Yeah, I sympathize with that, and like I said, there are characters that I think that doesn't work for. It sounds like there are some recent movies that might have done something like that, so not
I will
not
say,
incredibly thrilled about that, but
I think I like Wolfman, Leigh Whannell's Wolfman, a little more than The Invisible Man because I mean,
ooh,
it. I mean, the titular character is a character, and Christopher Abbott is given a chance to give quite a performance. Not as much as he could have with a more developed character, but still, there's an actor playing this role, and you can tell.
yeah, I completely agree. And I I I hope that the new movie, when I watch it, I hope I come away feeling similarly to how you feel. I really, like I said, I don't like to not like movies. which is partially why I don't watch a lot of movies now. But we'll see where it goes. For now, though, I think we had a pretty good. I don't know. I had a good time revisiting this.
This was
I'm glad we
upbeat.
brought it up.
This was upbeat. I love the positivity that 2010's The Wolfman really can bring into your life. I think we
Yeah,
need this movie
look,
around more
I
than
hope
ever.
to bring to bring as much positivity to this show in 2025 as possible. Not to say I'm not going to be critical to these movies. On occasion, it's necessary. But luckily, I think that's pretty easy because that's been our mission statement since day one. This is our first episode of 2025, our third year creating on this channel, even though it's gone through its evolutions. But I'm excited for what this year is going to bring, and if this episode's any indication, I'm going to have a lot of fun with it too. So I for one, I just want to thank anybody who's still here. Thanks for listening to this episode and having a good time with us. Of course, if you're new, I want to thank you for finding us and encourage you to like, to comment, to subscribe, to share. Sharing is huge. Sharing is caring. Putting us and our content into the hands of someone you love or someone you hate, depending on how you feel about us, would be tremendous. And it's not the only way you can support us. Gabe, how else can the people support us if they like us? You know what I mean?
Well, if you want to take the steps to the next level, there's a couple. If you want to take this to the next level, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can go to our Patreon and subscribe for a multitude of tiers that will get
Mhm.
you a multitude of a multitude of rewards. Question mark there. Yeah. So
Yeah, you you can get a ton of stuff on our Patreon.
yeah.
You can get exclusive stickers at a certain tier or above. But luckily, if you like our content and you are doing it to support our content, we have exclusives over on Patreon as well, which you get access to at any tier. Now, these exclusives sometimes will stay on Patreon for good, depending on how much time we have in our hands and how frequently we can release episodes. But there are still episodes on Patreon right now that have never been seen by anyone else before. So if you want access to that, that is any tier on our Patreon that you can subscribe to. But if you want to keep up with the latest for us and still support us without giving us your money, times are tough. We get it. Everybody gets it. You can head to our website, thatbadmedia.com, where we have information not only about the founding of That Bad Media and this show, Not That Bad, the one that started it all, but several other things that we have going on the channel as well, including archives, season breaks, everything that you can want about us will be on there. Your two favorite bad take artists and plenty of unsanctioned buffoonery to go around. So please support us if you like us. If you hate us, still leave a hate comment. We like those too. Anyways,
It warms my heart whenever we get one of those. You know,
yes, that we have lots of fun discussing them, and you help our engagement. So keep it up. And is there anything else you'd like to say before you take us out, my friend?
oh, hey, it's a new year, everybody. Stay safe. It's gonna be it's gonna be an opportunity to grow. It's gonna be an opportunity to learn, and most importantly, we get to continue to be a you know a part of this world and enjoy everything that life has to offer,
Yeah.
especially werewolf movies. So,
Yeah. And wake up
uh,
every day wanting to be better than the day before.
and yeah, that's about it for this episode. And oh, you can I'll potentially edit this out depending on the timing of things, but you can look forward to a very different type of content from us in the future because there's been a whole separate lane that Connor and I have been exploring, and I think we're ready to maybe take a new adventure on.
We have some plans. We've got some things that we're looking to do. This year we're looking to make it the biggest year in That Bad Media's history, and we can think of no better way to do that than to continue to grow, continue to expand our content, and continue to expand our horizons on what we're willing to discuss and to make content on. So keep your eyes peeled. We have things coming. Our social media will be the best place to keep up with when and where. But we hope you'll stick around and have some fun with it.
Right now, well, until next time, then.
Until next time.
Yeah. I'm Gabe.
I am Connor.
And it has been way too long since we recorded one of these. All right,
Yeah.
and that's not that bad. Slash that bad media.